Afo enjoys being with me more than he ever did with you. You should be ashamed that you can't satisfy your own husband. Can't you see that I'm better than you in every way? Look at my breasts and look at my waist. I don't blame him for leaving you. Just take a look at yourself. You look like a dry fish. You even stink from a distance. Tell me, which man would ever want to be with you? In the heart of a very beautiful African village, nestled in the eastern part of Nigeria, there was a place called Umuoma. This village was surrounded by a calm blue river that sparkled like the sky on a bright day. And everywhere you looked, there were tall green trees and thick bushes that made the land look so fresh and alive. The people of Umuoma were truly blessed. Their soil was so rich that anything they planted grew strong and healthy. Their rivers were always full of fish, and their forests were packed with animals, so no one ever went hungry. In Umuoma, if you worked hard, you were sure to live well. The villagers were happy, hardworking, and always kind to one another. They shared their joy and laughter easily, and there was a strong sense of community that made the village feel like one big loving family. In this wonderful village lived a young woman named Abama. She was the only child of her parents, and people often said that the gods must have taken their time when they created her because she was so beautiful. Abama's beauty was the talk of the village. Her long dark hair flowed down her back like a river of silk, and her skin was as smooth and flawless as the finest clay pot. Her smile could light up a room, and her eyes sparkled like the star in the night sky. Men from all over the village were drawn to her like bees were to a flower. Every day, their home was as busy as a bustling Orient market square, with young men lining up just for a chance to speak with her. Some even said they would do anything, even risk their lives just to win her heart. The whole village couldn't stop talking about Abama, the beautiful maiden whose charm and grace captured the hearts of all who saw her. But Abama was not just any girl. She had big dreams. She wanted to live a life filled with luxury and riches. She carried herself with so much pride, and she believed she deserved to be treated like a queen. The only man she was interested in marrying was the one who could spend his wealth on her, showering her with gifts and affection. So, when Ozo Amuche, one of the richest men in the village, came along, she didn't hesitate to say yes. Ozo was a wealthy farmer, but he was much older than Abama. But to everyone's surprise, she chose to marry him. The whole village was shocked and confused. Ozo already had 4 wives, and now Abama would be his 5th. But she didn't care what anyone thought. To her, it was far better to marry a rich old man than a young man who had nothing. She would often tell people, "I would rather be the 5th wife of a wealthy man than the only wife of a poor one." Abama believed that with Ozo's money, she would live the life of her dreams. She was sure he would treat her like the queen she believed herself to be, and that his wealth would keep her beautiful and happy forever. At first, everything went just as she had imagined. Ozo adored her. He treated her better than all his wives. Whenever there was a special event in the village, Ozo always appeared with Abama by his side, showing her off like a prized jewel. She wore the finest clothes, the most expensive jewelry, and her skin glowed even more than before. Her beauty seemed to grow with each passing day, and the people who mocked her decision to marry Ozo began to envy her. Abama became the center of attention wherever she went, and Ozo was so proud to have her as his wife. He never got tired of showing her off to everyone. While Abama enjoyed this new life, Ozo's other wives watched from the sidelines. They lived in their huts, quietly observing how Abama was living the life they had once dreamed of. Yes, they were still Ozo's wife, but none of them were being treated the way he treated Abama. His love for her was clear, and whatever Abama wanted, Ozo made sure to give it to her. If she asked for something, he did it without question. Soon, the other wives realized that if they wanted to continue enjoying Ozo's wealth, they had to stay on good terms with Abama. They needed her favor, because whatever they wanted from Ozo had to go through her first. Abama quickly understood the power she held in the household. She loved being the one everyone had to go through, and she began to enjoy her position a little too much. Her head started to swell with pride as she saw how much influence she had over Ozo and other wives. All of Ozo's wives had their daily task, working hard from dawn to dusk, except for Abama. Ozo would never allow her lift a finger, always reminding her, "You are too beautiful. I don't want a single scratch or mark on that perfect skin of yours. I didn't marry you to work for me. I just married you so that you will enjoy my money." So, Abama lived a life of ease. Her only duties were dressing up in fine clothes, preparing his meals, and warming his beds at night. The other wives couldn't stand it. They were filled with bitterness and jealousy. Whenever they gathered together away from Abama's sight, they would whisper and complain about her endlessly. Can you imagine one of them would start? "When Ozo married us, he had time for all of us. We were like one big family. But since Abama came into the picture, he doesn't even care about us or even look at us anymore," another would add, her voice laced with anger. "That girl must be a witch. We've worked our hands to the bone for her husband, and now she's sitting there, doing nothing, eating up Ozo's wealth while we struggle." They would curse her under their breath. "We even have to beg her to get something from her own husband. The gods will surely punish her. 10 times over, they will." The curses would fly until their tongues were too tired to speak. But no matter how much they grumbled or how much they cursed, there was nothing they could do. Abama was in control, and Ozo loved her above them all. In time, Abama gave birth to 2 beautiful daughters, Ngozi and Nebe. These girls were just as stunning as their mother, and the villagers couldn't stop admiring them. Ozo, proud of his daughters, spoiled them endlessly. He bought them the finest clothes and the most beautiful jewelry, treating them like little princesses. Wherever they went, people marveled at their beauty, and Ozo's heart swelled with pride. Abama, too, basked in the glory of her daughters, enjoying the attention and praise they brought. But then, one day, everything changed. Ozo Amuche fell gravely ill. His wives, including Abama, were deeply worried. They gathered around him, trying everything they could to help him recover. They brought in the village medicine man, who mixed herbs and prepared all sorts of concoctions, hoping to cure him, but nothing worked. Instead of getting better, Ozo's condition worsened with each passing day. Abama was terrified. She had built her whole life around Ozo's wealth and protection, and now the thought of losing him shook her to the core. What will happen to me if he dies? She wondered, her mind racing. Who will take care of me and our daughters? Fear gripped her. She refused to believe that Ozo could die. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that no amount of prayer or tears could stop what was coming. Ozo grew weaker, and finally, one fateful day, he breathed his last. He passed away, leaving Abama and his entire household in the grip of sorrow and uncertainty. Abama's heart felt heavy as she realized her worst fear had come true. Ozo, the man who had loved and spoiled her, was gone, and the life she had known was about to change forever. As the whole family grieved Ozo's death, no one mourned as deeply as Abama. Her sorrow went beyond losing a husband. She was consumed with fear and worry. How was she going to survive now? She had no farm, no crops, no source of income. All her life, she had relied on Ozo's wealth. She had been his favorite wife, living a life of luxury, never once thinking that he could die so soon. Now that he was gone, the reality of her situation hit her like a heavy storm. Day by day, she sank deeper into sadness. Even worse, she knew her co-wives had never liked her. They only pretended to be friendly because of Ozo, and she had overheard their hurtful words many times. Now, without Ozo to protect her, she felt completely doomed. After the funeral, Abama's worst nightmares came. Ozo's riches and wealth were shared, and Abama and her children got nothing. Her co-wives no longer had to hide their true feelings. All the bitterness and anger they had bottled up for so long was now unleashed on her. Any small mistake she made became an excuse for them to humiliate her. The household that once seemed like her kingdom turned into a hostile place where she had no single friend. With no farmlands or trade skills to depend on, Abama and her two daughters quickly fell into poverty. Hunger gnawed at them every day. They had nothing to eat, and Abama couldn't even ask her mother for help. Her mother was old, sick, and struggling herself. Abama had grown so used to the easy, luxurious life that she found herself too lazy to work for survival, even though she had no other choice now. Eventually, Abama became a beggar. Every day, she would swallow her pride and ask her co-wives for food. This gave them all the power they needed to mock her to their heart's content. "Look at this fool," they would say, laughing behind her back. She thought Ozo would live forever. "Lazy woman, when you were soaking up all the attention, you didn't think you would end up like this, did you? Now, you get to taste what we went through." Their taunts stung, but Abama had no choice but to endure them. She had fallen from the highest point in Ozo's household to the lowest. Despite her desperate situation, Abama refused to change her ways. She would sit at home all day doing nothing. When people even advised her to get a job, she dismissed them. She had always been too proud to work. After all, she still saw herself as the beautiful, cherished wife of Ozo Amuche, and in her mind, that meant she shouldn't have to struggle like ordinary women. She ignored the harsh reality of her new life, choosing instead to keep up appearances. Even though she was now in deep poverty, she clung to the idea that she was above working for a living. But deep down, the weight of her choices began to crush her spirits. Abama was trapped in a circle of pride, shame, and desperation, with no clear way out. Abama's beauty was still undeniable. Even after Ozo's death, her striking looks attracted the attention of many married men in the village, who saw her as a prize to be won. Knowing that her husband was now dead, and she was struggling to survive, they began to bring her gifts, bags of yams, cassava, and other foodstuff, hoping to win her over. They understood her desperation and knew how hungry she and her children were. But their intentions weren't noble. They wanted to get her into their beds. It didn't take long for Abama to realize the power she still had over these men. An idea began to form in her mind. Why should she go through the trouble of working in the market or doing hard labor when she could use her beauty to get what she needed? Abama decided that instead of earning money through honest work, she would exchange her body for money. After all, she couldn't let hunger kill her or her daughters. So, Abama became the village prostitute, selling herself to men in the village who were eager to pay for her attention. This became her new way of surviving, and she continued like this for years until her daughters grew older. Though Abama was able to feed her children and maintain a certain lifestyle, her reputation in the village suffered greatly. Many women despised her for what she had become. She had torn apart so many homes, seducing men and causing them to neglect their families. Abama didn't care about the destruction she left behind. She only cared about getting what she needed to survive. In her mind, she had no choice. But to the villagers, she was a villain, a homewrecker who used her beauty to manipulate and destroy. One of the men who fell under her spell was Nwafo, a wealthy hunter with 6 children. Nwafo had been a dedicated family man before Abama came into his life. But once he started having an affair with her, everything changed. He became so infatuated with her and soon left his wife and children to live with Abama. For Abama, Nwafo was a perfect catch. He was rich, and his skills as a hunter meant he always had enough food and fresh meat to eat. He also showered her with gifts, and with him by her side, Abama didn't have to worry about anything. Nwafo lavished all his affection on her, including money, completely forgetting about his own family. He was clearly consumed by his obsession with Abama. Meanwhile, back at home, Ego, Nwafo's wife, was left to pick up the pieces. Her heart was broken. She had built a life with the father of her 6 children, Nwafo. And what did he do? He had worked out on them. She struggled every day to provide for her children, working herself to exhaustion just to make sure they had enough to eat. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. How could she take care of 6 children all by herself? Her children were always fighting over the little food they had to eat, and Ego's heart shattered every time she saw them hungry and in pain. She could barely afford new clothes, and soon she began to look like a shadow of her former self, worn out and tired. Every night, Ego would sit outside under a tree, tears streaming down her face. Abama, Abama, she would cry, her voice filled with anguish. What have I done to you? Why have you chosen to destroy my life like this? Her once happy family had been torn apart, and all she could do was weep and wonder how things had to come to this. The women in the village, who sympathized with Ego, began to encourage her to confront Abama. How will you just sit down and allow your fellow woman take your husband just like that? No! They told her that she should go to Abama's house and fight for her husband. At first, Ego refused. She was not that kind of woman who believed in violence, and she didn't want to lower herself to Abama's level. But as the suffering and hardship became too much to bear, she realized she couldn't take it anymore. Her children were starving, and she could no longer watch them suffer. Something had to be done. With a heart full of pain and desperation, Ego decided to face Abama. That early morning, Ego woke up with her heart pounding and her mind set on confronting Abama. She could no longer bear the pain of watching her children suffer, while her husband lived in luxury with another woman. Without thinking twice, she stormed out of her house, her voice echoing through the village as she screamed, "Abama! Abama!" Her anger fueled every step as she marched straight to Abama's house. When she arrived, still shouting Abama's name, Abama emerged from her hut with an irritated look on her face. "Why are you screaming my name like a mad woman? Have you lost your mind?" she sneered. Ego, filled with rage and tears, shouted back, "Abama, untie my husband. Let him come back to me. What have I done to you? 6 children, Abama, 6 children. He abandoned them to live with you. You must be a very wicked woman, and the gods will surely punish you for this." Her voice cracked with emotion, the weight of her suffering heavy in her words. Abama responded with a cruel mocking laugh that pierced Ego's heart. "Hey, what will I not see this morning?" she laughed. She laughed so long and so wickedly that Ego was left standing there, confused and unsure of what would come next. Finally, when she was done laughing, Abama's face hardened into a cold, unforgiving stare. "You are even crazier than I thought, coming here this morning to shout at me," Abama said with a venom in her voice. "You see, Nwafo enjoys being with me more than he ever did with you. You should be ashamed that you can't satisfy your own husband. Can't you see that I'm better than you in every way? Look at my breasts and look at my waist. I don't blame him for leaving you. Just take a look at yourself. You look like a dry fish. You even stink from a distance. Tell me, which man would ever want to be with you? Nwafo now belongs to me. And when I'm done with him, maybe, just maybe, I might pity you and throw him back to you like the piece of trash that he is." Ego stood there stunned. Abama's words felt like knives cutting deep into her already wounded soul. How could she say such things so boldly, so heartlessly? Tears filled her eyes as she choked out, "Abama, you are so mean and evil. The gods will punish you for bringing pain to me and my children." But Abama was unmoved. She snapped, "Get out of my house." "No," Ego refused to back down, her voice trembling but strong. "I want to see my husband, Nwafo." "Nwafo! Nwafo!" She screamed his name, desperate for him to come out and face her. Before she could call again, Abama rushed at her, shoving her out of the compound. The two women began to wrestle, screaming and cursing at each other. They threw punches, pulling each other's clothes and hair, their rage spilling out into a full-blown fight. Suddenly, Nwafo, who had been silently watching the drama from inside, rushed out. Instead of stopping the fight or calming the situation, he shockingly joined Abama in attacking his own wife. Together, they beat Ego mercilessly, showing no mercy as they hurled insults and blows at her. Ego, battered and bruised, was eventually chased out of the compound, her body aching and her heart shattered. As she staggered away, humiliated and defeated, her tears mixed with the dust beneath her feet. The pain of her husband's betrayal and Abama's cruelty weighed heavily on her, and she knew that her life would never be the same again. Soon, the entire village was buzzing with rumors about Nwafo and Abama. People couldn't believe how far things had gone, and many began to wonder if Nwafo had been charmed by her. "Is it possible?" they whispered, spitting on the ground in disgust. "Fiakwa. That woman must have used some kind of dark magic on him. Explain this. How else could Nwafo abandon his own family like this?" The villagers would shake their heads, exchanging words of disapproval. I've never seen a woman so heartless in my life. Is she even human? Or is she some kind of wild animals in disguise? They would gossip on their way back from the market. I just pray that my husband would never fall into her trap. That woman is very wicked. Everyone had something to say about Abama, and none of it was kind. Ego, after suffering for so long, realized that Abama had no intention of letting her husband go. Desperate and heartbroken, she decided to humble herself and beg Abama. One morning, she walked to Aboma's hut and knelt down at her doorstep, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Abama, I beg you," she sobbed, her voice shaking with emotion. "Please, let Nwafo come back to us. His children are suffering without him. Even if you don't care about me, please, for the sake of our children, let him come home." Her cries were filled with desperation and pain. But Abama, as usual, showed no compassion. Instead of listening, she burst into laughter, mocking Ego's tears. "Are you tired of threatening me and coming here to shout like a mad dog?" After a while, her laughter turned into something crueler. She grabbed a long stick, waving it wickedly as she stood over Ego. "Get out of my sight, you witch! Foolish woman," she screamed, chasing Ego out of her compound. "You are an idiot to come here begging me. I've told you Nwafo is mine. Go and take care of your children." The villagers couldn't believe Aboma's cruelty. Everyone despised her and made sure to avoid her whenever they saw her coming, especially the women. Abama, however, didn't seem to care at all. She continued her reckless ways, jumping from one woman's husband to another. Her pattern was clear to the entire village. She would latch onto a man, drain him of everything he had, and once she was done with him, she would move on to the next. She had no shame, and her heart seemed to be made of stone. But what Abama forgot in all of this was that she had daughters who were watching her every move. Her children were growing up in the shadow of her wayward lifestyle, and it was affecting them in different ways. Ngozi, the younger of the two, was deeply ashamed of her mother. She couldn't bear the constant rumors that swirled around the village. Every day and everywhere she went to, she would hear people talking about her mother in hushed tones, and worse still, she often witnessed angry women coming to their house to either fight or beg her mother to leave their husbands alone. It was too much for her young heart to handle. Sometimes Ngozi would try to speak to her mother, hoping to convince her to change. "Mama, please," she would say softly. "Can't you stop this lifestyle? People are talking about you. They are pointing fingers at us and it's embarrassing. Mama, this is not right." But Aboma would explode with anger every time. "You stupid child," she would shout. "What do you know about anything? If I don't do this, how will I feed you? How will I take care of you?" The harsh words always left Ngozi feeling sad and withdrawn, sinking deeper into her own world of shame and silence. Nebe, on the other hand, was nothing like her sister. She didn't care about the rumors at all. In fact, Nebe was just like her mother, bold, defiant, and completely unfazed by the village gossip. She even admired her mother's ability to control the men in the village, and often defended her mother's actions. Whenever a woman came to their house either to plead or fight, Nebe would sometimes join her mother in fighting them off. She didn't see anything wrong with how her mother lived, and instead of feeling ashamed, she embraced it. To Nebe, this was just the way life worked. As the years passed, the two daughters grew up under the heavy shadow of Aboma's choices, each affected by their mother's lifestyle in different ways. Ngozi and Nebe had blossomed into young women, and their beauty was the talk of the entire village. Just like their mother, they were stunning, As they walked through the village, heads turned and whispers followed them everywhere, from their graceful legs to their flowing hair. Everything about them was just perfect. Their beauty was so captivating that young men would gather under the big tree in the village, sipping wine and discussing the two gorgeous sisters. Every man dreamed of marrying them, but when they expressed interest to their family, the responses was always the same. "You want to marry those girls," the families would say, shaking their heads. Abama's children, the children of the woman who spent her life hopping from one man to the other, destroying families and leaving children fatherless. What kind of upbringing do you think they've had? They are born to be just like their mother. We can't have such thing in our family name. It's an abomination. Though Ngozi and Nebe were admired by all, no family in the village would allow their sons to marry them. Despite their beauty, they became untouchable, cursed by their mother's reputation. The sisters attended every village maiden parade, hoping that some men would overlook their past and see their true worth. But all they ever received were admiration. No one dared to get close. During village festivals, they danced beautifully, their movements filled with grace and longing. But while the other maidens had men lining up to court them, no one ever came to their home carrying wine to ask for their hand in marriage. They watched as their stepsisters, who were not even half as beautiful as they were, found husbands and started families. Their age mates now had 2 to 3 children, while no man had even whispered a hello to them. The years passed by, and as they grew older, Ngozi began to feel the weight of their situation more heavily. One night, under a sky full of stars, Ngozi sat beside Nebe. The cool night air couldn't calm the storm brewing in her heart. With a worried expression, she turned to her sister. "Nebe," she began, her voice soft but filled with concern. "Aren't you bothered about what's happening to us?" Nebe, always unbothered, looked at her sister with a shrug. "What do you mean? What's happening?" Ngozi sighed deeply. "Are you really not worried that no man has ever come to ask for her hand in marriage? Not even one, even a drunk?" Nebe paused for a moment, then said, "Well, I was worried, but I've moved on. Since no one's coming, we should stop waiting. Let's become side chicks like Mama. Look, Maziwa gave me some money for you. He says he likes you so much. You know why he's wealthy and he will take good care of you just like Mazi Ike is taking care of me." Ngozi's heart sank. She stared at her sister in disbelief. "The gods forbid it, Nebe. I will never live like Mama. Don't you see? It's because of Mama's reputation that no one from this village wants to marry us. Look at the pain and sorrow her lifestyle has brought to so many families. Do you want that for yourself?" Nebe shrugged, her voice indifferent. It's not like we have any option. We are not getting any younger. I've already made my choice. After all, Mama didn't force any man to be with her. They are the ones coming to her, and they are the ones coming to me too." Ngozi shook her head, her eyes filled with disappointment. "I'm disappointed that you have no shame, Nebe. Are you even listening to yourself? Do you hear what you are saying? Well, I can't live this life, and I won't. I am leaving this village. I don't want this kind of life for myself or my future children. You can save yourself too. But if only you come with me." But Nebe had already made up her mind. She had fallen into the same lifestyle as her mother, enjoying the attention and gifts from married men. She saw no reason to change. To her, this was the easiest way to live, and she didn't care about the consequences. Ngozi, on the other hand, stood by her decision. She couldn't see herself living this way any longer, and she knew she had to leave the village if she wanted a chance at a better future. And so, with a heavy heart, Ngozi packed her things and left the village in search of a new beginning, while Nebe remained trapped in the circle her mother had started long ago. Ngozi left the village with hope in her heart, determined to start fresh in the city. Back in the village, she had worked as a tailor, saving every bit of money she could. She wanted to build a new life, one where no one would judge her based on her mother's past. But life in the city turned out to be much harder than she had imagined. It took months for her to settle down. The bustling city was unforgiving and nothing seemed to go as planned. She managed to rent a small room to live in. Still, without enough money to open her own shop, she found work with a woman named Olisa, who owned a big tailoring shop. Olisa was a beautiful, kind-hearted woman around the same age as Ngozi. She was happily married with 2 children and treated Ngozi like family from the very beginning. Olisa's kindness made Ngozi feel at home, and working with her was a blessing. Ngozi was a gifted tailor. All it took was for Olisa to show her a design once, and Ngozi would bring it to life with even more beauty than the original style. Customers loved her work, and soon Olisa's shop became more popular than ever. Business boomed, and they made a lot of money together. Ngozi's talent had brought a new light to Olisa's business, and everyone could see how valuable she was. But even with all this success, something seemed to be missing from Ngozi's life. Despite Olisa's kindness and their growing business, Ngozi could never shake the feeling of sadness that clung to her heart. She had thought that by leaving the village, things would change for her. But here she was, far from her old home, and still no man had come into her life. Every day, she would watch as Olisa's husband dropped by the shop, greeting her with soft kisses and helping their children. The love they shared was so evident, and while Ngozi wasn't jealous, it made her wonder what was wrong with her. At night, she would sit in front of the mirror staring at her reflection for hours. She was beautiful. Everyone said so. But why hadn't she found love? Why had no man ever approached her with the intention of marriage? The only men who came her way were those who wanted nothing than to sleep with her. No one ever wanted something deeper, something lasting. The loneliness weighed heavily on her heart. Olisa noticed that Ngozi was always quiet at work, and it began to worry her. She couldn't understand why someone as talented and beautiful as Ngozi seemed so sad all the time. Olisa wanted to help, so she began spending more time with her outside of work. Sometimes she would take Ngozi out for lunch, and the two of them soon became good friends. Ngozi had a kind heart, and despite her sadness, there was a light in her that Olisa admired. Whenever Ngozi smiled, it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. Olisa often thought it was the most beautiful smile she had ever seen. One Sunday evening, Olisa invited Ngozi over to her house. As they sat together, chatting about life, Olisa knew it was time to ask the question that had been on her mind for a while. She leaned closer and spoke softly. "Ngozi, you've been such a big blessing to me, and I want to be there for you too. I've noticed that you are not always happy, and I want to help if I can. Can you tell me what's been troubling you?" Ngozi sat quiet for a moment, and then, without warning, tears began to spill from her eyes. All the pain she had kept hidden for so long came rushing out, and she cried uncontrollably. Olisa immediately went to her side, wrapping her arms around her in comfort. That night, Ngozi poured her heart out, telling Olisa everything about her family, her mother's reputation, and the pain of never being approached by a man for marriage. "I want to marry, Olisa," she sobbed. "I want to have my own husband and children. I want to have my own family just like other women. Why can't I have that? Is that too much to ask? What is wrong with me?" Olisa held her tightly, her own tears falling. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could a woman as beautiful, talented, and kind as Ngozi have never been approached by a man for marriage? Olisa remembered how in her own time she had men lining up to marry her, and yet she wasn't even as beautiful as Ngozi. It didn't make sense. She felt a deep sadness for her friend, unable to understand how life could be so unfair. "This isn't ordinary," Olisa whispered, still holding Ngozi close. "There is nothing wrong with you, Ngozi. You deserve all the love and happiness in the world, and I'm going to help you. We'll figure this out together." That night, Olisa couldn't find sleep. She tossed from one side of the bed to the other. Her husband, noticing her restlessness, asked, "What is it, Olisa? Why are you restless?" Olisa sat up and shared her worries with her husband. They both agreed that it was not normal and decided to seek spiritual help for Ngozi. Olisa and her husband were Christians, and they believed that if Ngozi's problem was spiritual, their pastor could be of help. The next day, Olisa, determined to help Ngozi, drove her to her church to meet with her pastor. When they arrived, the pastor welcomed them warmly, and as soon as Ngozi shared her story, the pastor listened closely, his heart moved by her words. It was hard for anyone to believe that someone as extraordinarily beautiful as Ngozi could face such deep struggles. When she finished, the pastor bowed his head in prayer, seeking guidance. Suddenly, he paused and looked up at Ngozi with a serious expression. "Ngozi," he said softly, "I've seen where the root of your problem lies. It's your mother. The pain she caused to so many families is affecting you and your sister. She took men away from their wives without remorse and used charms to keep them close to her. Many families were broken, children suffered, and the wives were left devastated. The pain they experienced was immense." He continued, "There was one woman in particular, a mother of 6 children. Your mother took her husband, and in her grief and heartbreak, she uttered a curse. She said, 'The way you have taken my husband, making me a widow while he still lives, and left my children fatherless, your daughters will never know the joy of a husband. They will wander just as you have, and they will die miserably. Joy and love shall be far from them.'" As the pastor spoke, memories flooded back to Ngozi. She remembered Ego, the woman whose husband had abandoned her to live with Abama. Hot tears spilled down her cheeks as the weight of the curse sank in. Could it be that she had been destined to remain single and unloved because of her mother's actions? Was this why no man had never come forward to marry her? The thought crushed her heart. The pastor noticed her tears and took her hands gently. "Ngozi," he said with kindness in his eyes, "there is a way out. God is love, and his power is far greater than any curse. If you accept him into your life, I will pray for you, and he will break the chains of any curse that has been placed on you because of your mother's sins." Ngozi, overwhelmed by hope, fell to her knees. With her heart open, she gave her life to Christ right there in the pastor's office. The pastor prayed over her, asking God to break the curse and set her free from the burdens of her mother's past. He prayed with passion and faith, declaring that Ngozi's future would be different, filled with love and joy. When the prayer finished, he encouraged her to walk closely with God, assuring her that this would set her apart from her family's past and bring her into a new chapter of life. In the weeks that followed, it seemed like nothing had changed on the surface. No new opportunities or men came into Ngozi's life immediately, but there was something different about her. She was no longer weighed down by sadness. She smiled more often, laughed with customers, and joked around the shop. Olisa noticed the change and was overjoyed to see this new brighter side of Ngozi. For the first time in a long time, Ngozi felt truly free. Although things weren't perfect yet, she had peace in her heart and hope for the future. One evening, Ngozi was returning home from work when a car pulled up by her side. The driver whined down and called out to her. "Hey pretty, how are you doing? You look so beautiful," he said, with a smile on his face. "Do you mind a free lift?" Ngozi turned and looked at him. He was handsome, and his car looked very expensive. He must be a ritualist, she thought. After all, what does he want from an ordinary girl like her? She hastened her steps, totally ignoring him. Nnamdi watched her walk away in a haste. He wondered why she acted that way. Could it be that she was scared of him? Well, he didn't blame her. This was Lagos, and everyone was just cautious. But he liked her. This was love at first sight, and he wasn't willing to let go. He wanted to be friends with her, and to know her better. She looked so beautiful and had this warmness around her. Slowly, he followed her from behind. He wanted to know where she lived, but he didn't want to appear as a stalker. The next evening, as Ngozi approached her house, she noticed a familiar figure standing by his car, waiting at her gate. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized it was a stranger from yesterday. How did he know where she lived? She wondered, feeling a mixture of surprise and curiosity. She greeted him cautiously as he stepped out a bit towards her, his face showing a mix of nervousness and determination. "I'm sorry if it feels like I'm stalking you," Nnamdi began, his voice sincere. "But I'm just a man going after what he wants. I like you, and I really want to get to know you better. I have no ulterior motive, I promise." Ngozi studied him carefully. His eyes seemed genuine, and yes, she longed for a man in her life. But she wasn't about to rush into anything. She had been through too much to make a hasty decision. She wanted to be sure, to protect her heart. "I'm sorry," she managed to say, her voice calm but firm. "I mean, it's not your fault, but I don't appreciate you waiting at my gate like this." With that, she turned and walked into her compound, leaving Nnamdi standing there, stunned. Nnamdi couldn't believe what had just happened. He had never been turned down before, not once in his life. Women usually threw themselves at him, attracted to his wealth and looks. But Ngozi didn't even seem to care about any of that. Her calm rejection only made her more intriguing to him. She was different, and he wasn't going to give up easily. The next day, Ngozi couldn't help but laugh as she told Olisa about her encounter with Nnamdi. "That guy is stalking me. Firstly, I met him on the road when I was returning from work, and then at my gate," she gasped. "I wonder how he even found out where I lived." Olisa laughed heartily. These men can be crazy sometimes. "So, what did you do?" "Well," Ngozi continued, "he looks very rich, and you should have seen his car. At first, I thought he might be some kind of ritualist, but it turns out he's just a persistent stalker." Olisa grinned. "You need to be careful," she warned, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity. Just then, a tall, handsome man walked into their shop. and Ngozi's eyes widened in shock. It was Nnamdi. What was he doing here? She wondered, trying to keep her composure. Hey, Nnamdi greeted with a charming smile. I'm here to buy some clothes for my mother. Ngozi exchanged a look with Olisa, barely able to contain her laughter. She whispered, "That's him." Olisa raised an eyebrow playfully. "What kind of clothes are you looking for?" she asked, trying to stifle a giggle. "We have a few designs." Something nice for Christmas," Nnamdi said, clearly nervous. Both women burst into laughter. "It's only February," Olisa teased. "Who buys Christmas clothes in February?" Nnamdi grinned sheepishly. Okay, you got me," he admitted. "I'm here because I like your friend a lot. I can't get her out of my mind, but I think she's scared of me. And don't worry," he added, "I'm serious. I would never hurt her." Olisa gave him a long, scrutinizing look, then pulled Ngozi to the side. "I think he really likes you," she whispered excitedly. "And he's so handsome and rich," she almost screamed, giggling like a child. "You're so lucky, my friend. Just give him a chance. He's not a stalker, he's just a silly man in love." "Do you really think so?" Ngozi asked, still unsure. "I know real men when I see them," Olisa said with a wink. "I'm an expert in this field. You can trust me on this." And that was how Ngozi's relationship with Nnamdi began. Nnamdi, it turned out, was the owner of a multi-million naira company in Lagos and lived in a grand mansion. Despite his wealth, his love for Ngozi was genuine and deep, something he fully couldn't explain. He showered her with gifts, sending them to her workplace, and often took her on weekend dates to the beach or lunch in his luxurious yacht. Nnamdi knew how to make life fun, and Ngozi found herself enjoying every bit of it. What she liked the most about him was his simplicity and humility. Even with all his money, Nnamdi was down to earth and treated her with the utmost respect, always making her feel like a queen. They laughed and played together like children, and Ngozi couldn't believe how lucky she was to have found a man like him. As their relationship blossomed, Ngozi felt a new sense of joy and peace. For the first time, she truly believed that happiness and love had finally found her. One evening, Ngozi received an unexpected call from Nnamdi. He had sent his driver, Kofi, to pick her up for a surprise dinner. Ngozi was caught off guard. She wasn't prepared for a night out, but she quickly got ready, dressing in a beautiful outfit that made her glow. As she stepped into the car, a smile danced on her lips, and she couldn't help but feel excitement bubbling inside her. How did I get so lucky, she thought. Nnamdi was everything she had prayed for: kind, caring, and sweet. She chuckled to herself, remembering the time he had come to their shop pretending to buy a Christmas dress for his mother, only for her to later learn that his mother had died many years ago. His goofy charm had won her over. As Kofi drove into a beautiful garden lit up with candles and delicate decorations, Ngozi's heart fluttered. The place looked magical, like something out of a fairy tale. There, standing tall and handsome with a bouquet of flowers in his hand, was Nnamdi. He looked like he was waiting for a queen. His eyes lighting up the very moment he saw her. Ngozi's heart raced. What was happening, she wondered, as she walked towards him. Nnamdi handed her the bouquet, his hands trembling as he spoke. "You look so beautiful," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "I still can't believe I found such a good woman, and one with so much beauty." Ngozi blushed, feeling warmth spread through her. "What are we doing here?" she asked, her eyes scanning the enchanting surroundings. "This place is so beautiful." Just as she turned to take it all in, she saw Nnamdi drop to one knee, holding out a sparkling ring. Her breath caught in her throat. "I don't know if it was fate that brought us together," Nnamdi began, his voice full of emotion. "But you've touched my heart in many ways. So many ways that I can't even explain. Every day, you make my life brighter, and all I want is to grow old with you. I love you, Ngozi, more than words can explain. Please, don't let us waste any more time. Be my wife and make me the happiest man on earth." Ngozi's eyes filled with tears, her heart pounding with joy and disbelief. Was this real? Was Nnamdi really asking her to be his wife? It felt like a dream, but this wasn't a dream. Nnamdi was the king of her heart, and she knew without a doubt that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. With tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "Yes, yes, Nnamdi, I will marry you, and I will marry you every single day of my life." Nnamdi swept her into his arms, pulling her into a warm embrace. As their lips met in a sizzling kiss, he lifted her off the ground, swirling her around as they laughed together, their happiness radiating through the night. They were getting married. The next day, Ngozi rushed to tell Olisa the good news. As soon as she walked into the shop, her face glowed with joy. Olisa could tell something amazing had happened. "You don't mean it," Olisa exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "You are getting married?" "Yes, my friend. I'm so happy," Ngozi beamed as they hugged tightly. "I can't believe it. I'm so happy for you, Ngozi. You deserve so much happiness." Olisa held her close, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. "Thank you so much, Olisa," Ngozi whispered, overcome with gratitude. "Thank you for always being there for me." They laughed and hugged again, both overjoyed by the moment. Ngozi couldn't believe how far she had come, from a life filled with sadness and uncertainty to a future filled with love, hope and joy. She had found her forever in Nnamdi, and now she was ready to begin the next chapter of her life, surrounded by the love and support of those who cared for her. A few weeks later, Ngozi, Nnamdi and a few of his kinsmen set out on a special journey to her village. This was a moment Ngozi had once dreamed of, but had never thought possible. As they entered the village in Nnamdi's luxurious car, people couldn't stop staring. The villagers, used to the quiet life, were captivated by the sight of the big shiny car. Children ran excitedly behind, shouting, "Moto! Moto! Moto!" as they chased after it, their faces full of wonder. Ngozi, sitting next to Nnamdi, felt a wave of emotion to wash over her. She couldn't believe how far she had come. She was no longer the shy, fearful girl who used to hide away, afraid of what people would say about her or her family. God had truly changed her story, turning her life around in ways she had never expected. Now, she was back in the same village, but this time with a handsome, wealthy man who loved her and a bright future ahead of her. As the car pulled into her family's compound, Ngozi's eyes fell on her mother, Abama. She was sitting in front of their small rundown hut, looking frail, thin and almost unrecognizable. The once proud and beautiful woman had been reduced to a shadow of her former self. The moment Abama saw Ngozi step out of the car, tears streamed down her face. "Ngozi, my child," she cried out, her voice trembling with emotion. Ngozi's heart broke at the sight of her mother. "Mama, what happened to you?" "What's wrong?" she asked, rushing to embrace her. Abama clung to her daughter, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ngozi, my child," she repeated over and over as they wept in each other's arm. It had been so long since they had seen each other, and the years of separation melted away in that moment of reunion. After their emotional embrace, Ngozi introduced Nnamdi and his kinsmen to her mother. The news of Ngozi's impending marriage spread quickly, and soon some elders from the family were called to the house. Abama could hardly believe her ears. Her daughter Ngozi, the one she had feared would never marry, was now engaged to a wealthy and handsome man from the city. It felt like a miracle. But alongside this joy, there was also deep sorrow in Abama's heart. Nebe, her other daughter, was no longer alive. She had died during childbirth, after following in Abama's footsteps and becoming pregnant by a married man. The weight of Nebe's death had crushed Abama's spirit. She felt responsible for what had happened to her daughter. "I killed her," she would cry. "I should have been the one to die. I wasn't a good mother to my children." The guilt consumed her, and in her grief, she had fallen ill, with no one to care for her. But now, seeing Ngozi, her joy returned, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled through her tears. She was so thankful that Ngozi had chosen a different path and had not repeated the same mistakes she had made. After the introduction ceremony, Nnamdi and his kinsmen made plans to return in a few weeks for the traditional marriage. They left the village with high spirits, but Ngozi decided to stay behind for a little while. She needed to spend more time with her mother, not just to care for her, but to also know what had happened to Nebe and share the good news of Christ. Ngozi could see how broken and miserable her mother was, and she knew that what Abama needed was God's love and forgiveness. That evening, as they sat together, Abama shared the news of Nebe's death with Ngozi. Ngozi cried bitterly all through the night, mourning her sister. "If only she had listened to me. If only she had come to the city with me," she cried. The next day, Ngozi felt better. She gently began to share her own journey with her mother, telling her about how she had found peace and happiness through Christ. Abama listened intently, tears rolling down her cheeks as Ngozi spoke. "I never realized the consequences of my actions," Abama cried, her voice filled with regret. "I hurt so many people. I lived a terrible life, and now I see the pain I caused." Ngozi held her mother's hands tightly, her heart aching for her. "It's okay, Mama," she said softly. "The important thing is that it's not too late. God can still help you, just like He helped me. You have to forgive yourself and give your life to Him. Also, you will seek forgiveness from those you've hurt, and then allow Him to heal you. That is the only way you can find joy and grow old peacefully." Abama nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of her past, but filled with hope for the future. She had never felt so broken, so desperate for help, and in that moment, she knew all she needed was God. She made the decision to give her life to Christ, trusting that He would take away her guilt and pain. Looking at Ngozi, who had found love, joy and peace despite everything, filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. As Ngozi prayed with her mother that night, Abama's tears of sorrow turned to tears of relief. She felt the burdens of her past begin to lift, and for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of peace in her heart. A few weeks later, the entire village gathered in excitement to witness the grand marriage ceremony of Ngozi and Nnamdi. The air was filled with joy and celebration, as the feast included plenty of food, music and laughter. It was a day the villagers would never forget. Everyone admired how beautiful Ngozi and her husband looked in their stunning traditional marriage attire, their love radiating through every smile and glance they exchanged. The villagers, many of whom once doubted that anything good could come from Abama's family, stood in awe. Here was Ngozi, the daughter of the once controversial woman, getting married to a wealthy, kind-hearted man from the city. As Ngozi and Nnamdi danced together, they couldn't stop gazing into each other's eyes. The love between them was so evident, and it was clear to everyone that they were truly blessed to have found their soulmates. After the ceremony, Nnamdi and Ngozi returned to the city, eager to begin their new life together as a married couple. Their life was filled with love, peace, and happiness, and they cherished every moment they spent together. Back in the village, Abama was no longer the woman she used to be. Her transformation was visible to everyone. She had sought forgiveness from those she had wronged, making peace with the families she had hurt. Though she was no longer physically strong, her spirit was renewed. Ngozi, ever the caring daughter, made sure her mother was well taken care of. She sent money regularly and hired a maid to look after her, ensuring Aboma was comfortable and cared for in her old age. Aboma lived the rest of her days as a transformed woman, grateful for the second chance at life that God had given her. She found joy in seeing her daughter happily married and knowing that her mistakes had not destroyed Ngozi's future. Aboma's final years were filled with peace, contentment, and happiness, a far cry from the life she had once led. She had learned her lessons. Hey besties, thank you for watching this amazing story, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it. I would like you to share your lessons in the comment section, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you are yet to subscribe. Also turn on your notification bell so that you get notified whenever we post new stories. Thank you so much for all your support, your encouragement, and your kind words. They really mean so much to me, and I just can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. Right now, I'll have to go and see you in our next story. Bye!